The return of Tom Vanderford in all of his glory. We're going to talk about the football schedule, the basketball roster, and we're just going to catch up with the old friend. So stick around. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Steven Willis of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special thanks to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. We're going to be joined by Tom Vanderford to talk basically about the upcoming football season and basketball season and catch up with what's going on with him. Tommy,
hey,
this football schedule is proof that I'll say to you what I said to Michael Katz yesterday, that if Ole Miss fans complain enough, they will get their way. The only 11 o'clock kickoff that I see is on the road at Oklahoma and the day after Thanksgiving against Mississippi State. But that game is more Mississippi State's fault than Ole Miss's fault. Otherwise, it's all been flexed. It's either going to be the 2:30 game or a night game, and I think Ole Miss fans will be pretty pleased with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, last year we got the short end of the stick, and I think enough people griped and complained, and it looks like our athletic department may have griped and complained as well. And so we're getting a good schedule this year.
Yeah, and it sets up in a good way. Even the times that go out. For instance, Georgia plays at Auburn for the first time at night in recent memory. And we all know that playing a night game at Auburn, that can just be a weird place, whether you're Georgia or not. That feels like a game that Hugh Freeze is going to get. The week after is Ole Miss going to Sanford Stadium, stuff like that. Then the week after Ole Miss plays Georgia should be tough, but you have the 11 o'clock game at the Oklahoma Sooner. It kind of gets into position of where it needs to be.
Oh yeah. I'm pleased as punch with the schedule. I'm sure sure Lane Kiffin, our coaching staff, are as well.
Yeah, it should be pretty good. Is there any game that you're looking forward to on the schedule, or any game that you're going to this year?
I'm going to try and go to a lot of the home games, but the one I'm looking forward to the most, believe it or not, is the Oklahoma game. I think depending on what happens in that game, that'll probably define our season.
Yeah, the first opportunity for Ole Miss. Now, they need to take care of business against Kentucky and Arkansas, which they should. They will have better football teams than Kentucky and Arkansas. But they did have better teams last year than Kentucky. But the LSU game at the end of September, that game, I think, is going to feed families.
Oh, yeah.
That is a game that whenever you look at the computer models, one is 9, one is 10, one is 12, one is 13.
Yeah.
They're always right beside each other. And according to the computers, at least, they're the same football team. LSU might be a little better offensively. Ole Miss might be a little better defensively, but it is very even. I am looking forward to the end of September. You got the Tulane game and the LSU game, and that is Ole Miss battling with different breeds of Cajuns over the couple weeks.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's exciting, and that LSU game is one I'd like to make, but we'll see.
Yeah, the way it's set up, if Ole Miss is 5-0 after September ends, if they're 5-0, that means that you just have to go 2-1, or essentially 2-2 out of Georgia, at Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Florida. Handle the rest of your games, and you're in the college football playoff. Just 2-2.
Yeah.
But a 5-0 September is an absolute must.
I agree. And we've got the talent to do it.
Yeah, I'm extremely impressed with Austin Simmons and the way he has kind of taken the bull by the horns, for lack of a better word, taking over the starting quarterback position. I'm very impressed with that. The receiver room, last year, Ole Miss had Jordan Watkins and Trey Harris. There were some good receivers there. This year has the chance to be a different category. There's nobody like Trey Harris on the roster. Understand that. But right below there is now about 3 players. And Caleb Odom has a chance to have a DK Metcalf type impact in the red zone, and you can use him in different ways. I think the running back room that Ole Miss has been more thoughtfully put together than it has in years past.
Yep.
And if you talk to the national pundits that do all the preview stuff, at the beginning of the season at least, Ole Miss is expected to be a defensive football team. So if the offense just kind of gets its bearings and turns into a machine by the Tulane game, wins those games before it, but by the Tulane game, you're kind of clicking, this football team could be pretty special, honestly.
Oh, I agree. I'm last year I was all in. This year I'm kind of cautiously optimistic, but I do not believe that a lot of folks realize just how good Austin Simmons can be. They saw a little bit in the Georgia game on that one drive, and that was a very small sample size, but I think it's going to be a special season. We've got good running backs. We went in the portal and beefed up our line. Now, our line's not awesome, but it's serviceable. And, the defense is going to be very good. Very good. I think if we can just get the secondary to gel, they could be special.
Yeah, and it's weird to think of because as you have people talking about the football season, there's rarely much mention of Suntarine Perkins.
Yeah.
And to me, Suntarine Perkins has a chance to be SEC Defensive Player of the Year. He's the returning leader in sacks and tackles for loss, and obviously those pundits don't think he can do it again, or he only did it because of Princely Amamiel and Walter Nolan. But Suntarine Perkins, listen, when he was going through the high school all-star game circuit, this is where I really noticed Suntarine Perkins. When he was at the Mississippi-Alabama game, him and Jam Brown were on the field at the same time. When those two players, just those two, were on the field at the same time, Alabama did nothing. When those two were off the field, Alabama scored points and moved the football. They completely shut down the offense. Those two players are going to be very instrumental in Ole Miss's defense this year. You're going to have Jam Brown likely playing the role that Walter Nolan played a year ago. You're going to have Suntarine Perkins being Suntarine Perkins. And if the other players, they become role players and just kind of turn the defense over to Jam Brown and Suntarine Perkins, you have a chance for that front seven. And by front seven, I mean run defense.
Yeah.
To be very, very good. They do need to gel on the back end. They do need to answer some questions. They do need to get healthy and find out who's going to be there. But if all of that happens, the pieces are in place for, you hate to say stuff like this, but a T. Martin type season. After the Peyton Manning year when Tennessee was supposed to be so good and didn't make it, they kind of choked it away. The next year, they weren't expected to do it again. They had T. Martin, a bunch of new faces and all of that. They managed to ride that defense and T. Martin all the way to, for them, a national championship. I think Ole Miss can ride Austin Simmons, Suntarine Perkins, and Jam Brown all the way to a college football playoff this year.
I agree. And, you didn't even mention Eccles. I think Eccles is going to show out this year as well. And, I
think Cam Franklin's going to be special.
I was going to say, too, Cam Franklin. So it's going to be special. That's like I was talking to a state dude the other day at work. And he said, I don't know what's happened, but you guys just out-recruit us on the defensive line now. And I said, well, that's Randall Joyner and that's Pete Golding. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, those monster defensive linemen that used to always go to state and end up getting in the NFL, having long careers, we're getting those kids now. Mm-hmm.
They're good players. They are really good and they're effective. They are game wreckers coming to Ole Miss, and you just don't hear about it because all the news a year ago was on Walter Nolan and Princely Amamiel and JJ Pegues, and it should have been. Those were really good players. But Jam Brown was a freshman All-American. William Eccles was a midseason freshman All-America. Cam Franklin was a 5-star. Suntarine Perkins was a 5-star. There is talent on that defensive front, and I think people are going to be shocked to see exactly what that looks like moving into the season.
and I think our linebacker depth is good, probably, in my opinion, better than last year. But I think, it could be a very special season.
Yes, and we'll change gears just a little bit and talk about the basketball when we get back with Tom Vanderford in just a minute. So stick around for that. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their mind. It's kind of the atmosphere that you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I actually was just on the app, and Zone Deals were offering 10% off exclusive zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup matchups. If you want to go see Lionel Messi and Inter Miami and all that doing group play in this first expanded Club World Cup, they have you. I love that I can see exactly what my seat would look like before I buy it. No surprises. And if you find a better price in the same row and section, they'll credit me 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Tom Vanderford comes back on the show. Listen, Chris Beard had a press conference. It's weird to have a basketball press conference in June. That is something that is a little bit strange. It's also very weird that this basketball team, they're kind of finished roster-wise and are a finished product of what they're going to look like going into the season. They've started practicing. They're actually really working hard. And this team, as I mentioned with Michael Katz yesterday, Tom, this is a team that is starting to look more and more like a Chris Beard coached basketball team. I'm not even talking about how they played the game on the court. I'm talking about just size and speed and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, and I'll go a step further. I think it's the deepest basketball roster that I've ever seen at Ole Miss.
Yeah, and the pavilion was built for a team like this.
Yeah.
You have Miami coming in, which normally Miami had a pretty good basketball team. I don't know what they're going to look like next year. They did not have a good year this year. You have a game at St. John's at Madison Square Garden. They're scheduling all over the place and at a high level. Ole Miss is kind of on that Auburn trajectory of where Bruce Pearl took the Auburn Tigers, which he started before the transfer portal era. Now it can go much quicker after the transfer portal era, but this basketball team has a chance to be pretty good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He has massively improved his roster each year he's been with us. So, and I'm fairly positive that NIL is there for him as well. So he may, he's gotten some really good players, man. And he's beat out some really good teams for some of these kids, And we got Malik Dia coming back, so it's going to be good.
Yeah, and there's more of an international flavor this year on Ole Miss's roster with a couple of players from France committed to come to Ole Miss. We're still waiting on one of the players to arrive. And Augusto Cassia on the roster as well, a transfer from Butler. There's kind of an international thing. And I was talking with Michael Katz yesterday. This kind of feels like a way for international players, a different way for them to make it to the NBA. They think that the college game will prepare them for the NBA better than playing in the Euro League would do. And honestly, I agree. Once there's a stylistic difference between American basketball and European basketball, and the American game is still what the NBA tries to play.
Exactly. Exactly. And, there's a lot of good talent overseas out there. And from what I've seen so far, I'm not a basketball expert by any means, but he seems to have a really good eye for what he wants and how somebody's going to fit into his system.
Yes. And for the first time in the era of Chris Beard, the smallest person on the court is not going to be 5'10". The smallest person is going to be 6'2".
Yeah.
So Keza Giffen versus Juju Murray, there's a little bit of a difference there. You saw against North Carolina a year ago to where they just threw the ball down low. They switched and switched and switched until it was Juju Murray against one of their bigs, and they took advantage of that down low. Now it's going to be a little bit more positionless basketball, a little bit more of what Chris Beard likes, of everybody being able to do everything. Shots from the outside. I mean, you have Travis Perry, who transferred in from Kentucky, who Mark Pope said was on his way to being a legend at the University of Kentucky before he transferred. You have Elias Camerdine from France coming in, who, if he gets suited up, we're still waiting on him to get to Oxford, but if he suits up, he's an 18 points per game type of guy. And you have Keza Giffen, another player from France who transferred in from High Point, who originally committed to USC, eventually transferred to Ole Miss. He's a penetrator. This basketball team looks like it could be a lot of fun, and it's an athletic group, which means the defense is going to be ramped up even higher than what it was a year ago.
Oh, yeah, they're going to be fun to watch, and I honestly, I really expect a lot of sellouts this basketball season in the arena. I really do.
Speaking of sellouts, football sold out of season tickets in June, and I can't remember that happening before.
I can't either. I mean, it's like when I told my Alabama buddies when they hired Saban, I said, best money you'll ever spend. Same way with us. I mean, when Lane took over, there weren't a lot of people going to the games, and, we needed a change. And it's just on a trajectory that I've never seen at Ole Miss.
The kind of the funny thing, and this kind of is related to the show I did on Friday. Matt Luke got Matt Corral, signed him as a 5-star quarterback. Hugh Freeze got Shea Patterson. Coaches had no trouble getting elite high school players. Lane Kiffin just can't seem to do it. You got Austin Simmons, but that's kind of a special circumstances. Lane has trouble where lesser coaches had a little bit more success.
I may be wrong, but I think the Duckworth thing is how much you want to spend.
That's everything. Yeah. Ole Miss is going to have trouble signing elite quarterbacks out of high school, period.
Yeah.
Because once it gets down to brass tacks and real money is on the table, especially with rev share and everything trying to get done before July 1st, and all of that, there's a game that's being played. And Mr. Yellowfeller over at Auburn, he's going to throw down some money. And in South Carolina, they have to throw down some money because they have not been successful. So we'll see exactly how it goes with that. But listen, I talked about Reese Wise. That dude wanted to commit the moment he got on Ole Miss's campus when he got to Oxford.
Yep.
I talked about Luke Fahey, which I think, in my opinion, he's going to be the second quarterback taken. He's a Matt Corral electric type player. That his deficiency, the reason he's not a 4 or a 5-star, is because he's 6 foot tall.
Yeah, that don't mean anything.
Yeah.
The old pro NFL quarterback thing. I mean, that's a thing of the past, especially with our offense.
Yeah, you got Kyler Murray running around in Arizona like Papa Smurf. So, I mean, height, definitely. That a pro-style quarterback, you don't have a bunch of Justin Herberts running around anymore.
Not at all. And you speaking of that, I think one thing that's and I don't know how much you'll use it this year, but I don't think people realize just how fast Austin Simmons is.
Yeah, he's a 4.5 guy, legit 4.5 guy.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that as well.
He talked about, whenever I interviewed him earlier on my podcast, that he wanted to run the ball like Jackson did. And I was like, you are not as big. You're not as thick as Jackson. You don't need to run the ball that much. And I think a lot of his stuff is going to be really fast processing stuff. You saw in the Georgia game how that worked and how quickly the ball got out of his hand.
Oh,
I think there's a situation to where defenses kind of find themselves in a pickle because they can't get to him. He sees what's going to happen before it gets there.
Yep. Oh yeah, he's. I may be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I think he is. When it's all said and done, he's going to be a very, very, very high draft pick.
Yeah, he has the talent to be a 1-1 type guy. Anyway, when we come back, we'll talk to Tom Vanderford a little bit more about what we missed over the last 2 months, my recovery, and the new studio that is due in on Monday. So stick around for that. All right, we're back with Tom Vanderford, back in his usual spot. We're going to air it on Sunday morning during the off season like we always do, but I'm starting to ramp up to normalcy. Part of that is getting back with Tom. You know, this is the last interview we are going to do in the old setup. We're going to have a completely new setup the next time you come on. The podcast is growing. I did a thing to where the podcast is sitting at about 300,000 views, away from 5 million. And we are about 150 subscribers away from 15,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy to think of because we just wanted to create a podcast where people that were fans of Ole Miss could kind of sit there and hear different perspectives on things. Because in 2014 and 2015, when Ole Miss was legitimately good, nobody had fun with those games. There was always a problem. There was always something going on. And we wanted to get away with that. And it has been hyper successful.
Yeah, you know, people love homers, and you know that's me. I'm a Ole Miss homer. One thing I'd like to say just real quick. We lost a huge Rebel fan this last week here in Corinth, Allison Alberson. She passed from the same type of cancer I had, and it kept on her quick, and it was just no help. But I just want to say that, you know, her and her husband Ben, they're big Rebels. Our daddy Jimmy, and we're all hurting up here in Corinth. So if anybody could say some prayers for them, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, and David Johnson of Inside the Rebels, he is going through his own cancer battle right now as well. So as long as you're doing the prayers, do one for David Johnson. He's good people. So in the last 2 months, what have I missed? What has Tom Vanderford been doing in the last 2 months? Are you retired yet?
No, I retire at the end of the year.
Okay.
I made a deal with my employer, so, you know, I could at least go until the end of the year so they can gainfully look for my replacement. So I'm looking at, closing out this year and retiring. Other than that, I'm wearing this today because, you know, I'm not the biggest baseball fan. I'm a big Ole Miss fan, but I don't follow it as closely as Derek does, or you know, Kara or you. But I do want to say that I was impressed with them. I know we fell the game short, but they were picked 15th out of 16th, man.
Yeah, and the sad thing about this was, and this drives me absolutely bonkers. You can talk about them being above expectations, all they were. Like they picked 15th and they made it to hosting a regional.
Yeah.
That is awesome. They did not play good baseball in the regional.
Oh, no. By no.
Yeah, people have every right to be upset about what went down in that regional. But you also have to admit that they exceeded where they were predicted to have.
Well, they were, and they were just between you and me, or all of us, I guess. The one thing I did notice was I wasn't too happy with the management of the pitching. You know,
It was a
all
bad defensive team. It was a really bad defensive team.
yeah, it's all hindsight. But that last game, I would have threw Elliott.
Well, it wouldn't have mattered because if Ole Miss would have just hit cutoff men in that last ball game, just that one thing,
Yep.
Ole Miss would have won that game.
Yep.
And little stuff add up, and one run becomes two, and that happens 2 or 3 times. Next thing you know, you're down 10-3 in the 4th inning, and it's all because you didn't respect baseball.
Exactly. Speaking of that, I'd love for us, it won't happen, but I'd love for us to try and get that hitting coach at Murray State down to Oxford. Those kids smash the ball.
Yeah, they need to get that coach down there and say, hey, come down. We'll make you a coach in waiting. Whenever Bianco decides to step aside, that guy gets the whole program, the whole shebang. I think he would do it, although it was admitted that basically journalists and the national media have been lying over the last couple of weeks saying, no, he doesn't cut his own baseball field and all of that. The narrative with that, but Murray State played baseball the right way. When I talk about respecting baseball,
yeah,
they respected baseball.
Exactly. And they're in the College World Series
with
an extremely small budget.
Yes. And, good for them. Basically, a couple of the horse racing people that went to Murray State that got them together to do some NIL. They got some transfers from Power 4 teams, and they were able to make a run. Congratulations. That leadoff hitter that they have, he was the best player in the Oxford Regional.
Yep.
And there's not really any getting around that.
Right.
But if Ole Miss would have just done what you're supposed to do in a situation, Ole Miss would have beat Murray State and advanced to the Super Regional. They would have hosted Duke and they would have beaten Duke.
Oh yeah, yeah, they'd have beaten. Yeah, but it would have, could have, should have.
Yeah. So anyway, I will let Tom go real quick. I do want to let everybody know, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you very much for tuning in. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you later.